Vito Chirco, the host of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am Vito Chirco, here by myself, by my lonesome, kind of, at least. Anchoring this ship solo, kind of, at least. Dominic Chirco is out, my brother, my sidekick, my partner in crime, but John Macaron, always here. Doc, what's going on today?
Good morning, Vito. What's going on? I'm looking forward to hearing what you got for the Tigers Talk podcast. Lots of news and notes regarding the Tigers and news and notes all across Major League Baseball. Let's kick this bad boy off. What do you got for us, Vito?
Well, we also have a guest today, don't we? Matt B. Mowery of the Oakland Press will be on to discuss the Tigers and Justin Verlander's resurgence. How about Cabrera going for the batting title? Looks like it will happen now. And Brad Ausmus' fate as Tigers manager. Will he last a third campaign in Motown? Doc, let's start off, though, with JV. His resurgence of late, almost throwing the no-no, would have been his third, would have joined the likes of Hall of Fame pitchers, the greatest of all time, to throw it. So, almost did it, let up that hit to Iannetta in the ninth inning, a fastball down the middle. But you know what? He threw his best pitch with high velocity, 96, 97, in the ninth inning. Very good velocity all game long he was featuring. And that was impressive out of JV after going through what he has with the core muscle, surgery, rehab, recovery, and now getting back to this good of a stretch where he's been almost lights out and unhittable, as he showed last week against the Halos, Doc.
This season with the Tigers, you've seen that the pitching has been very inconsistent. JV was part of that too. Starting off the season, coming off of the injury, he was not that consistent. His good stuff was getting hit, and you started to really question, like, wow, is this contract going to end up being the worst contract ever signed by the Tigers? But then after his fifth and sixth starts, he started to turn things around, and now you're seeing that he's getting consistent outs, and he's getting back to the old must-see JV. And then that game was unbelievable. The Tigers need it. They need someone to step up and become that ace, because once that trade was made, the Detroit Tigers are now in a free fall, and they need someone to step up. And if JV can be that ace, that's going to make Al Avila's job much easier in the offseason, because that's one less pitcher that he's going to have to bring in. But do you think he can get back to being that ace of the Detroit Tigers?
Well, really, the question is going to be the ace of a contending ball club in 2016 for the Tigers that wants to win the Central, wants to win it all. That is my question, my concern for the Tigers with JV as a number one going into next year. I think he's very good. Can be lights out, must-see JV, as you said, and can bring his varsity stuff, as Rod Allen will say as well on the broadcast on Fox Sports Detroit. But for me, that ace of a star-laden roster that can make it all the way, of a roster that's competitive enough, good enough to make it all the way to the Fall Classic and to win it all this time for once. I'm not too sure of that still, but at the end of the day, it still makes it a lot easier, the job of Al Avila going into the offseason, knowing that he has an ace-caliber arm, or at least a very good and strong number two, going into next year in the Tigers' rotation, in the form of Justin Verlander, who I think can flash it, can show it off here and there. It's just about, how about him displaying this now over the course of a full season? Because he was roughed up when he first got off the DL, but rightfully so, or deservingly so, because he was hurt, rehabbing, recovering, all that good stuff. Now he's back to being pretty close to the masterful JV that we used to see, and I think with last week's start, we can officially declare that for this small sample size of starts that he's been on, that he's been masterful, and return to this form over this course of 5-6 starts now. But can he showcase it now over the course of a full season? Showcase that masterful JV form? That's my question for the Tigers front office brass, and Al Avila specifically. Does he know that? I don't think he does, but can he trust in JV at least being that going into next year? I think you can't totally do it, but I think the odds of him trusting in JV to be that right now are above 50%.
Some people are saying, well, we need JV to continue to pitch well, because potentially, if there is a suitor out there, maybe a team will take a flyer on him. My personal opinion is JV is going to be on the Tigers in 2016. That $28 million salary is going to be super tough to move. Nobody's going to take on that contract. So I think the people that are thinking that JV can be traded, or that maybe the Tigers might be willing to eat some of that contract, I think that's a little bit far-fetched. He's going to be here throughout the duration of this contract, and I do think that you need him to continue to show the stuff that he has been. Now, the interesting part was, once he started to turn things around, the Tigers still weren't winning, because he'd give up, that kind of that rough inning. He'd give up like 3 to 4 runs, and then boom, the Tigers wouldn't score for him. So right now his record is not reflective of how good he has pitched in the last month.
And you know what? The Tigers, they really want to win it all next year. If they really want to open up the checkbook, the pocketbooks of Mike Ilitch, you got to buy another ace on the open market. You have to add another ace caliber arm to go alongside JV. I think because you need to add on to what JV is already bringing right now, what he can bring going into next year. I don't think he is that bona fide ace anymore, but he's a bona fide number 2 that can be an ace every so often when he goes every 5th day. So it's going to be an every so often thing where I think he brings his varsity stuff and his masterful form of the Justin Verlander of the past, which has shown up more and more in recent memory. And with that being said, they're not going to trade him after losing Fister, Scherzer, Porcello, all these guys, Sanchez not being the same. They've got to keep Justin Verlander, even though he might not be the number 1 next year if they add another arm and add on to what JV can bring as a number 2. They still need him to be that supporting, that great number 2 rotation presence next year if they want to have a chance, any chance at all, just to win the AL Central over the Royals, Indians, White Sox, and those clubs next year.
Right now, as we speak, Justin Verlander's 2-6 with a 3.45 ERA, 71 strikeouts. The Tigers are sitting 10 games under 500 at 60 and 70, approximately 20 games out of first place as we sit here. It's really disappointing. What's really fascinating, Vito, is you start talking around town, people are like, when's football going to get here? When is, college football going to start? When are the Lions going to start? The way the Tigers have played and the abomination of that series versus Toronto has really turned off the fan base. And what's coming up this week, you got 3 games on the road versus KC. You thought you were outscored in Toronto. It could be bad. This series versus KC could be very scary. It's kind of to be expected, knowing that the Tigers are throwing out, their 3, 4, and 5 pitchers are really horrid.
Well, Buck Farmer, I mean, come on. He's got to be gone. He's got to be a bullpen arm. I think it could be an efficient long reliever, but that's the best case scenario for Buck Farmer going forward.
Do you think
Tigers roster?
Do you think Buck Farmer gets a win this year?
I don't think he will. I think he'll be a guy that is using the bullpen, should be using the bullpen, but right now they're so injury prone. All these guys are hurt, not performing effectively. They have to go and reach down to the level of Randy Wolf, a 39-year-old now, just turned 39, who is pitching for Buffalo and the AAA affiliate, in that farm system of the Blue Jays. Tigers got him from there because they're so desperate right now. They're sleeping so low for these starting arms, and Buck Farmer has to start because of that. So maybe if the Tigers score enough, he will win one, luckily. And maybe he'll win one out of the pen in long relief because I think he's all right out of the pen. And that was a topic my brother and I discussed last week on Tigers Talk. We said maybe he can go 2 or 3 and do so effectively here and there because he has good stuff, but it's spotty, it's off and on, and he can't go through a batting order more than once realistically, maybe twice, maybe on his best day possible. So that's my take on him. Being able to win a game, maybe one game. And you were saying how the team has just gone into a tailspin. It's faltered so much and really fallen off the face of the earth of relevance, of being a relevant ball club. Losing 15-1, I believe it was on Sunday against the Jays, getting blown out. But that shows to me as a kind of a fan of the Jays and a backer of that club going far in the playoffs this year, that they can rake. And when they rake, they are close to unbeatable. And if they have David Price and they hit like that, the Jays are not going to get beaten this postseason. So it's about David Price pitching effectively as that ace of the Blue Jays pitching staff going into the fall, going into October. Can he perform effectively like he has in the past with the Tigers, with the Rays? I think he can, and because of that, the Jays are a bona fide, legit contender to win it all out of the American League. And that segs into something I want to discuss later on in today's podcast about the top 5 teams right now for the American League pennant. The Jays are right near the top, if not at the top for me. And I'll rank those teams in order from 5 to 1 later on in today's podcast, Doc.
This series versus Toronto, they were outscored 29-6. They played awful. The pitching was horrid. The offense was barely existent. Toronto basically had 4 hitters that were just on fire, marked by and highlighted by a 3 home run, 9 RBI performance by Edwin Encarnacion. When you're watching a series like that, are you thinking like, wow, I'm really getting upset? Or are you thinking, you know what, this is to be expected. Toronto is one of the best offensive teams right now in the American League, and the Tigers are sending up basically amateur pitchers. Were you upset at that series, or you thought, you know what, this is expected. It's Toronto on the road. They were going to bomb the Tigers.
It was expected, Doc. The Jays are much better. Offensively proven, stacked in the middle of the order. Edwin Encarnacion, a 26-game hitting streak, I believe now. 11 or so home runs, 12 home runs in the month of August. Supremely good, talented RBI machine. And he's supported by Jose Bautista, Joey Bats, Troy Tulowitzki, by Josh Donaldson, my favorite to win the American League MVP this year. So all those guys in the middle of the order makes the Jays lineup stacked, and they're going to beat up on a lot of teams that are amateurish. The Tigers' rotation right now is the definition of amateurish. So for me, it was expected, and I wasn't disappointed because the season's been long gone for a long time now, right? Really, it has been. It's unsalvageable. It's been far from salvageable for a long time now, Doc. So for me, it was to be expected, and it wasn't a disappointment for me as a Tigers fan.
And then in Saturday's game, you had the horrid mistake by Anthony Gose in center field. Buck Farmer's pitching in the fourth inning, and Gose, for some unbeknownst reason, forgets how many outs there are and makes a catch and starts trotting to the dugout. And then the Toronto base runner's like, okay, this is great. This guy's not paying attention. He scoots all the way home. And he came out and he apologized to Buck Farmer and called it a stupid play. But it just kind of upset me, and I was ranting and raving on the Motor City Sports Rant. I'm just thinking, that's just kind of a sign of players that are checking out. That's kind of a mistake that is unacceptable. And I don't know, he stayed in the game. Brad Ausmus kind of let it slide. He did say it was, a mistake that's made, and he really kind of didn't, really
attack
get
the issue, right? And Ausmus lets a lot of these issues slide, it seems like, and not become a big deal when they should be big deals. And Jim Leyland, a veteran manager like him, how he was, his antics, would have handled this inside the clubhouse with the players individually and let them hear about it. And Ausmus doesn't do that.
When you look at the incident by itself, okay, it's a single mistake. But now we're looking collectively since the season began. You've had numerous base running mistakes. You've had numerous guys at first base getting picked off by right-handed pitchers.
Anthony Gose.
Yeah.
Right, he's on it. He did it twice in a game recently. I mean, how bad do you have to be, right? Base running blunders left and right.
Missed signs. Castellanos was benched earlier in the season for missing signs. These are all things, when you look at it collectively, is a sign of a team that's not managed well. And it's very frustrating and disappointing. And that's the reason why so many people are upset and really thinking that it's time for a new manager for the Tigers.
The leash is not long anymore for Brad Ausmus. His fate, I think, has been decided already. I think he's gone at the end of the season, and rightfully so, because of bullpen mismanagement issues left and right. As I noted in my recent article for Detroit Athletic Company, to promote and plug that a little bit, wrote about Ausmus and his failures as manager in year 2. As well, he never, and hasn't gotten better to this point, and never will at this point, in my opinion, and will never get another job managing a Major League Baseball ball club. Maybe a AAA club, minor league club, independent league club, or maybe as a hitting coach, catching instructor, or, just one of those guys that goes around minor league affiliates of a major league ball club and is that roaming or roving instructor. Maybe he could do that, but he's not going to be a big league ball club's manager anytime soon again. And I think ever in his career coaching in the big leagues, because he's already proven to so many people, right? And not only his first season, which you give him a pass for that because they won 90 games, they still made the playoffs, but this year, falling 10 games under, the most since 2008 for the Tigers being under 500, since that horrible 2008 season when they went 74-88, I believe it was. That was a miserable campaign where they couldn't pitch like this year. And it's showing again the ugly signs. It's rearing its ugly head. The pitching woes, the managerial woes with Ausmus. And that's why he deserves to be fired, no matter what his friend and backer C.J. Nikowski says, who played with them on the Tigers a long time ago for 2 or 3 years. And he's the only guy right now supporting Ausmus, right? Only guy that has come out and written an article or said anything in favor of Ausmus keeping his job for a 3rd year in Motown.
Now, based on what you've seen, the co-host for the Motor City Sports Rant, Jarvie the King, Jason Jarvie, said that Brad Ausmus is maybe checked out. Maybe that he notices that the writing's on the wall, in that the new general manager, Al Avila, may be kind of going through some back channels looking at new managers. You think Brad Ausmus is potentially checked out?
I would hope he wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't put it past him. I think right now he's seeing the writing on the wall. It's clearly saying that he's not going to be here next year. So for him, what's in it for him, right, to prove himself to the Tigers GM, Al Avila, the new GM, new club president, and the front office brass? There isn't too much. But, Doc, remember this, too. If he wants another job in the future, next year and going forward, well, he's got to prove something the rest of the way. And he's not going to save his job in any way possible, short of a miracle happening. That would be the only way he would save his job, in my opinion, Doc, with the Tigers. But going forward, to get another coaching job with the major league or minor league ball club, he's got to prove something the rest of the way, that he has some fire still left in him. Because the season's over with. It has been over with for a long time. But how about building for next year, putting this team in the right direction, going into next year, where they can be a contending ball club maybe in the AL Central, reclaim their status as a top dog in the American League and in Major League Baseball. So with that being said, Ausmus has a little bit to prove still. And if he's totally given up and checked out, he should be fired right now then, if that's the case. Not that they're going to find out that by getting inside his head, but you can tell here and there inside the clubhouse, which has been noted as dysfunctional by many pundits and people watching this team for a long time this year now.
Now it's September 1st as we're recording this podcast, so we know what that means? September call-ups.
Correct.
Where the Major League Baseball rosters can increase up to 40 players. So far, as we record this, the Tigers have only made 2 moves. They've recalled Kyle Ryan, pitcher, and catcher Brian Holiday.
Those guys do nothing for me.
Nothing for you?
Yeah, they're no long-term solutions. Now, they got to call up Steven Moya, right? He's been heating it up according to guys watching him. More home runs, more power, RBI production. He's got to get called up to prove something of quality and of worth going forward, if he wants a roster spot, in my opinion, for next year. But this has kind of been, Doc, an elongated spring training session for the Tigers players, too. Veterans and rookies or youngsters. The last month and a half or 2 months now, when they've been out of the playoff race, kind of, to right now being totally out of the race. So for me, this last month is for these guys, Collins, Moya, to prove themselves worthy of a roster spot going into next year. And for guys like Vmart to right the ship, to rectify his issues at the plate. Can he do that going into next year? Can Castellanos, a guy like that, keep it up going into next year? Can Go save his roster spot for next year by hitting better going forward and making better plays in the field, better decisions on the base paths? Because these guys have to rectify what they haven't been doing right either going forward, I think, to save their roster spots or just to improve upon what they can do going into next year, in a year when they want to contend once again, as it was termed by Dombrowski, the former GM and club president, as a reboot, not a rebuild stage or rebuilding stage. It's a reboot right now for the Tigers, meaning they want to win again next year. And with that being said, guys, as I said, have to prove themselves and get better going into next year. And that's why they have to treat this like an elongated spring training session. Moya's going to be up. He's going to be called up too, with that being said, because they want to see what he's made of. Is he a good enough power hitter, or is he just a platoon guy, a fourth outfielder who can't hit one side of the plate good enough to be a full-time starting corner outfielder? That's a question for me with Moya and a lot of these youngsters on the farm and top or middle-tier prospects, and the position ones especially, because Tigers don't have too many high-quality position prospects at this point. So unless they flip a guy like a Fulmer for a hitting guy, a position player on the farm from another ball club, or for another guy that just as a young hitter, they don't have too much of youth when it comes to hitters and hitting prospects on the farm. And that concerns me a little bit, but they're a veteran core, veteran-laden offensive attack 1 through 9, realistically, outside of a few guys who are young, which is good for the Tigers next year and going forward, such as specifically Iglesias and JD Martinez, who I like both of those guys a ton.
Now, Vito, I'm checking out the series preview for the Tigers taking on Kansas City. Game 1 tonight is Justin Verlander versus Johnny Cueto. Interesting matchup, number ones, and Verlander comes in at 2-6 with a 3.45 ERA. Johnny Cueto's 9-9 with a 2.94 ERA. That's going to be a good game. You going to check in, peek in on the opening game of the series?
Doc, I got to check it out. Verlander, because of that, he's exciting right now to watch. He is must-see JV once again, as we noted already. Not to go on that tangent again. But Cueto, talking about him now, is he going to be good enough in the postseason for the Royals? Tonight is not going to really do anything for him, whether or not he pitches good or not, because Tigers are this lackluster team now, not even trying, don't have the will to win. Even though the offense can reach up to a higher level and perform at a high level at times, he's not going to prove much by going out there and pitching 9 or 8 innings today. It's about what he does now going forward. And for me, I have my concerns about Cueto being an effective every fifth-day starter for the Royals in the postseason, and really pitching on short rest as well, maybe, in the postseason, with an arm and everything that, has had injury proneness in the past. And teams, talent evaluators were concerned about that when looking to trade for him at the deadline. The Royals made the bold move, didn't have to give up a ton either. And in doing so, they're taking a risk to try and win it all this year, because Cueto will not be back in KC next year. They better win it all now, and he's going to have a large part to do with whether or not they do win, whether or not they lose in the postseason early or go all the way to the Fall Classic and win it all this year. He's going to make a big difference one way or the other for the Royals in October this fall.
Yeah, and Vito, check this out. Detroit, the Tigers are 1-7 in their last 8 games following a loss, and 1-7 in their last 8 Tuesday games. So,
well, what are their records on the other days anyways, right? They're probably maybe 2 or 3 wins on those days. And they've been horrible at home as well, let alone traveling, to KC, playing on the road against these clubs that are just much better than them, like Toronto this weekend, much better than the Tigers. And the Royals are right up there with the Jays. We'll talk about that once again, my rankings 5 through 1 of the American League pennant favorites that I have. And we'll talk about that at the end of this edition of the podcast.
Yeah, and you've noticed too, Verlander kind of struggles a little bit versus Kansas City. Sometimes he does become a little bit hittable, and he just has to kind of avoid that big inning. He's been consistent, but when he struggles, it's usually in the first couple innings when he gives up a lot of runs, when his stuff is not exactly developed just yet, and they're able to hit it. But I do think that maybe tonight, coming off of a 5-0 shutout, complete game, one hitter, I'm hoping that Justin Verlander can continue this success and give the Tigers a chance, because if they don't, they could be swept again.
But JV being the true JV, performing like he did last time out against the Halos, who are a good offensive attack, kind of. Royals are probably a little bit more deeper balanced, offensively speaking, 1 through 9. But for me, a true JV in his bona fide ace form is better than the Royals, what they can bring out offensively speaking. So their offensive arsenal isn't limited, but with Gordon out, a guy like that, I say JV in his truest, purest form is better than what the Royals can offer offensively. So I could see JV going at least 7. I'm saying 8. He's going 8 tonight. And I could see him K'ing 7 or 8 Royals batters. And they do swing and miss, have that proneness, that tendency to swing and miss as well here and there. So I'm saying 7 or 8 Ks, and I think JV as well goes 7 or 8 tonight against the Royals.
And look at the pitching matchups for the rest of the series. Randy Wolf versus Yordano Ventura and Matt Boyd in the series finale on Thursday versus Edinson Velquez.
There's a reason why they're 10 games below 500 right now at 60 and 70. And they won one more game only the rest of the month of August after dropping to 59 and 66 on August 25th after losing to the Halos. And I believe Randy Wolf was on the mound, who hasn't been too bad, Doc. Let's talk about him a little bit. How about what he's shown? Is he worthy of a 5th starter spot going into next year? Now, I'm not going to bank on it. I'm not going to say that he is. But if he keeps it up the rest of the way, I think I trust him more than Buck Farmer being the 5th starter. How about you?
It's a great story, but he's not going to beat Father Time. He's 39 years old. He's got decent numbers. I mean,
he does for the Tigers right now, doesn't he?
Yeah,
and he was great in AAA for the Jays.
Yeah, he's allowed 4 runs on 14 hits over 14 innings with 10 strikeouts. And his last start versus the Angels, no run support, So it's one of those things where I don't think you're going to see a spot for him next year when you got some arms. You got some arms in AAA and AA that potentially could move in there. You got Kyle Lobstein, you got Buck Farmer, you got other guys that the Tigers are going to look at, and potentially they're going to bring in some free agents. So I just think that he's right now a fill-in. He's a guy that they're just trying to get some production out of. I don't see him being here next year.
I think you have Lobstein, and remember Shane Green, another name to take into account, who's been pitching hurt this year. He pitched through injuries, according to many people and writers out there who focus on the Tigers. So with that being said, he's still young, was good last year with the Yankees when he was healthy, supposedly. If he was healthy at one point when he was pitching well to start off the season in the first month or month and a half, and then got hurt after that, I'm going to tell you right now, Doc, I could see him contending for the 5th starter spot if healthy next year, along with Kyle Lobstein. I think Lobstein and Green are going to be the 5th starter candidates going into next season. And I see the Tigers picking up at least one arm to support JV, Anibal Sanchez, who hasn't looked good. Sanchez now hurt. I don't know about trusting him either. There's nobody really to trust in this rotation right now outside of JV. And then you got Norris, I think, going into next year, and then Fulmer or Boyd. So right there, with that being said, you got 4 starters I'm counting for right now at least. Or 3, let's say. JV, Sanchez, and then Norris for sure. Then maybe Fulmer, maybe Boyd as 4. And then as a 5th, maybe Green, maybe Lobstein. But they're going to pick up a guy to prevent them going that deep down into these young starting pitchers who might never be capable of starting every 5th day.
A point of debate that people around town are having is, obviously the 2015 season is a wash. Garbage season, it happens. It wasn't expected, very disappointing, very frustrating for everybody. But now, when you look at the makeup of the organization with very, very few resources in the minors, they've depleted the minors, they're going to have to rebuild that. Is it going to take 4 to 5 years for the Tigers to get back to the playoffs? Is this a team that, with a couple pieces added, can get back to the playoff hunt? Because Kansas City is 80 and 50, and they're playing lights out. The American League all across the board has improved. You got Toronto. You got the teams in the American League East. The American League Central has improved, and many people are thinking that it's one of the top 2 divisions in the American League. So do you think, in your opinion, that this situation with the Tigers can be fixed rather quickly, or are we in for a bumpy ride with the future of this club that we all love?
No way, Jose, about it taking 4 or 5 years. I'm saying next year they could contend and win the AL Central again. The Royals, remember, are 30 games above, okay? Tigers were 40 games above in 06 at one point and then faltered down the stretch, made it in as a wild card, and made the Fall Classic. But they weren't consistently good after that right away. Remember, it took them until 2011 again to make the playoffs after 06. And the Royals now are going to make it for their 2nd straight season. But now with all the pressure, expectations, and they're losing maybe Alex Gordon. They're losing Johnny Cueto for sure. Then the Jays, who you brought up, who are very good, outstanding in my opinion, offensively great. They're going to lose guys too, David Price specifically. So with that being said, you're losing your front-line arm, best starting pitcher. Royals, same thing with Cueto. So Ventura then has to step up for the Royals next year. Duffy has to be even better, more consistent. And then the Jays have nobody else, really. They have veteran guys, Burley, Dickey at the top of the rotation. But you can't trust upon them being your staff base going into next year at their current ages. So for me, the Jays, Royals take a step back, and there's so much parity in the AL where if you pick up an arm, and if the Tigers pick up 2 starting rotation arms, I'm saying for sure they're a contender for the AL Central Division title next year. And then that comes also with a bullpen arm. They have to also take that into account. So that plays a part, getting that bullpen arm as well. If they do that, get that strong late inning guy to support what Rondon and Wilson can do, and get a lefty specialist along with 1 or 2, and I say 2 starting pitchers, this team is a bona fide contender in the American League Central in 2016, that quickly.
You've noticed now that a player that we've counted on that we're paying very highly that got a new contract last offseason, Victor Martinez, has struggled mightily since the All-Star break. Now, people are thinking that, he's feeling the lingering effects of the surgery. His swing is not 100% where it needs to be. But are you buying or selling on Victor Martinez coming back? Because I think, he's getting a year older. He's a proven hitter, but it's around this time when you start noticing that, a player at this age starts to tail off. You buying or selling on Victor Martinez?
Well, I think the Tigers paid him what they did to get 2 good years out of him. Now, they're going for 1 good year at this point going into next season. But I don't believe he's a shell of his old self, but he's not going to be the 2014 VMAR who hit for average, walked a ton, barely struck out, and hit for power as well. I don't see the Tigers getting that combination out of VMAR going forward, where he's that dual threat at the plate that can hit for power and hit it all over the field as well and hit for average. So for me, VMAR is still a good DH, but as reliable going into next year as he used to be, as he has been when he's been an all-star, no. I mean, the definite answer is no for me.
You're
but
selling?
They still have to get something out of him. So I'm not totally selling. I'm saying he's going to be a middle-of-the-order guy that's not going to be the great protection that he used to be, but can be here and there. So just not as consistent, but still better than what he has been this year. Because I think he'll be more fully recovered going into next year. And I think 1 more good year, Doc, out of him, or 1 more solid year out of him.
So what I'm hearing you saying is potentially a down year for him could be 285 with maybe 10 to 15 home runs, and you would take that.
I say he's going to hit 275 next year with 15 home runs. 15 home runs tops. But if they get that and then get 75 to 80 ribbies out of him as the 5th batter, with JD as the 4th batter, if he keeps hitting like he has this year, VMart won't be a bad 5th batter then. And that's where the Tigers should have put him a long time ago. They finally did it on Sunday against the Jays. After all this time, the last game of the month of August, Ausmus finally inserts him into the 5th slot in the Tigers' order. What made you wait all that time, Brad Ausmus, right?
Yeah.
It made no sense to me, Doc.
Yeah,
and that's another sign of him being this guy that's just not all there. He's inept. He's not a good enough manager.
You said it, exactly. Just another mark on him. And really, when you look at it, besides the fact that I guess he's a player's manager, the players like him, there's not much else that you can really look to and say, yeah, that's a guy that can take us to the promised land. So it's just one of those things where it was just, like I said, and I've been saying it quite a bit, wrong time, wrong manager, and that's what really ultimately led to Dave Dombrowski being let go. That's not the manager you need back in 2014 when you got a club that's assembled like this. It just wasn't the time for him. You needed experience. You needed to go out there and get a guy. And we'll talk probably in future podcasts about potential managers and keep that in point because I'm not really thrilled with the likes of Gardenhire, Manny Acta. I mean...
Well, Acta's the analytical guy, I guess, but he hasn't proven anything, and Gardenhire towards the end was not successful and never led the Twins out of the first round, or he did 1 year. He won a series 1 time in all those postseason appearances for the Twins after winning the AL Central. That's disappointing for me and a sign of Gardenhire maybe not being the right guy to lead the Tigers to the promised land.
Yeah, so we'll do our research and we'll try to look at we'll look at some candidates potentially that are outside the box, maybe from the Cardinals organization, from other organizations out there that potentially could be brought in. I know the most fans are going to want a guy with experience, but right now I think the Tigers fans are really kind of frustrated with, managers that don't have experience for sure. Because
you get the situation where you have right now with Ausmus, where the players are buddy with them and like them. But remember, the difference is between him and Leland, they respected Leland. They don't respect Ausmus. Price never respected him. Justin Verlander, I guess, maybe does. But these veterans, the clubhouse top veteran presences, do not respect Ausmus fully. And that's a problem in itself right off the bat. And that's why he has to go. Just another reason. And I think the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, was Dombrowski backing Ausmus for so long. I think it ultimately cost Dombrowski his job. And they could have had a veteran presence, remember, back then. If Leland would have retired a year earlier, they would have had Terry Francona. And if he gets fired by the Indians, which won't happen, they've won like 6 in a row now, and they'll be good again next year, and they want to keep building upon what they already have built upon in their rotation and with their young hitters. He'll be back next year. But if he were to ever be in the most weird situation possible, get fired by the Indians this offseason, Tigers would have to pick him up, go after him as much as they could. Because you know what? He's a guy that could lead this ship right in the right direction to the promised land. He's proven it before. He'd be a top candidate, but I don't think he'll be available, which is why you have to then consider a guy like Ron Gardenhire. I mean, Gardy might have to be the guy, even though he might be this rusty, old-school guy like Leland. We don't want to go down that route totally again, but I love Leland. And Gardenhire, the Twins loved him. They did for a long time until the end when he sucked it up the last 2 or 3 years. So it's hard to kind of quantify how good of a manager he really is when you look at what he did at the end of his tenure in Minnesota. And then before that, as I noted before, Doc, and as you know, he didn't do anything in the playoffs with the Twins. And we're talking about not only playoffs going forward, if we want to, truly have a good team next year, we're talking about going past the first round, going to the Fall Classic. And this time around, if they make it, winning it all. So that's the difference maker right there. And Gardenhire might not be that guy to get the Tigers over the top. But then who is? And we can obviously talk about that in later podcasts too.
Now, a bright spot for the Tigers and a point that allows fans to really have confidence is the play of Miguel Cabrera. Despite the fact that he was gone for a significant period of time with that calf injury, he's come back and is qualified and is able to pursue the batting title. You think he gets it?
Definitely. Hitting 358, was hitting 367, maybe could still touch 370. He's not going to hit 400, but he's the best all-around slugger in baseball, and once again, impressively proving that. Look at him, coming off the DL and hitting better than ever before. And he's never bothered, has such high pain tolerance. Maybe when he's drinking, too, by the way. He's a big guy, probably can take a lot. But injury stuff, too, can take a lot of hits, a lot of knacks. And they don't really get him down or bother him. He went on the DL for the first time this year in his Major League Baseball career. That's telling of what kind of player he is and what kind of pain tolerance he has as a major leaguer too, Doc. And that's why he's a supremely talented guy, gifted athlete. And I said athlete, gifted athlete. I think he is. And he's an all-around Major League Baseball player, can even do it defensively and take all those hits. And despite the injury, still be good at doing everything at the plate. That's why Tigers have a definite chance still to win it all next year. When they have him hitting like he is right now, there is no doubt that the Tigers still have a chance to be contenders next year. If they add some pieces to support him in the lineup, specifically in center field, they have to add a center fielder because Ghost can't hit a leg. He can't get it done in center field. And Davis really isn't a center fielder, and he's a free agent. So he won't be back more than likely in Motown next year either. So they got to support Cabby now. And if you do, Cabby might even hit better than what he is right now. Because, I mean, he's got protection with J.D. Martinez, but V-Mark could hit better. He really has to if he does. Cabby might hit 400 one year. He's still in his prime, maybe just by a little bit, but he's in his prime. And I think we have another 2 good years out of him. At least another 2, because you never know. He could be a DH now the rest of the way. Maybe they convert him to that once V-Mark's out. And then it alleviates everything that he has to do in the field, saves him from injury more. This could be a guy that hits 330 to 350 to 370 maybe even when he's 35, 36. That's how good and supremely talented he is as a slugger, Doc.
All right. Now, upcoming, stay with us. We're going to have Matthew Mowery from the Oakland Press, Detroit Tigers beat writer. He's going to kind of talk about the week that was and some news and notes regarding the Detroit Tigers. Stay with us on the Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company podcast, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Doc here for FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast. Go visit their great website, FanaticU.com, for great gear for the Pistons, Tigers, Wings, and now college football starting. You want to rock out great gear for your tailgate. I know Michigan and Michigan State are kicking off their football seasons, and you want to have great gear to represent your favorite team. Go visit FanaticU.com, and if you shop online, use the promo code when you check out DSP, and if you use that promo code, Vito, you save 15% off your entire order. That means anything, even clearance items that are greatly reduced, you can even save an additional 15% off by using the promo code DSP. So visit FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter.
And now on the line with me is Matthew B. Mowery of the Oakland Press, covers the Tigers for the Oakland Press, and you can follow him on Twitter at Matthew B. Mowery. So, Matt, let's first discuss Justin Verlander's resurgence. Can he be trusted now as the ace on a contending Tigers club in 2016? Your take on that?
Well, I think they're going to have to, unless they really want to pony up the money that they were unable to pay Scherzer, and it looked like they were unable to pay David Price. Unless they're going to take those same kind of dollars into the free agent market this winter, they're going to have to get ace kind of production out of Justin Verlander for what they pay him. Is he going to give them that? That's been the question for the last couple of years. At least now we have a glimpse that maybe what we've kind of been thinking was probably a portion of his struggles may have been true. You know, the injury with the core muscle repair that he had to have done a couple off seasons ago that kind of wrecked 2 seasons there, and then it took him a while to come back. Obviously, this year from the biceps strain. Problem is, a lot of the things that people were talking about, you know, as slam dunks having already happened with Verlander, you know, him being over the hill and the velocity being gone. Well, we've seen some of the velocity come back, but some of that is just, it's realistically true. Eventually, he's going to get to that point. Now, maybe some of that was a little bit of crying wolf on some people's part, trying to predict something that maybe hadn't quite entirely happened yet. But the truth is, eventually he is going to get to that point. Now, over the next couple of years, if he pitches the way he has been pitching the last month or so, the Tigers will gladly take that, and that will allow them to do some other things down the line in the rotation. You know, maybe go after a 2 and a 3 to put it in the rotation behind him. You know, and just kind of cross your fingers that maybe those age-related problems that everybody was, you know, thinking were lurking right around the corner for him. You know, if you can hold those off for a couple of years, that's probably where they're going to get the best value out of the contract. And then, as we said all along, it's going to be hard to get the value out of the contract from him, you know, at the very end, because inevitably everybody gets to that point in their career, whether you're, you know, Justin Verlander or Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens, all of those guys that were power pitchers have to kind of transform themselves. And, you know, unless he figures out, and it seems he has, and in some senses figures out kind of how to pitch as a different pitcher, you know, those last couple of years are probably going to be a little bit more of a struggle for him to try to, you know, kind of deal with some of those age-related things. But, yeah, if he can pitch the way he's pitching now, I think, you know, hopefully for the next couple of seasons, then that contract is probably going to look less egregiously bad as maybe it did a couple weeks ago.
And then, Matt, it makes the offseason so much easier for Alavila in his first year as full-time GM for the Tigers in 2016, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, if you're looking to go out and get maybe a 2 and a 3, or if you think Norris can be the 2 behind Verlander or Sanchez, if you want to put faith in him, you know, then if you're looking for, you know, 2, 3s, 3s, and 4s, those are a heck of a lot more, you know, cost efficient, or, you know, you can afford those a lot more, and you can afford getting a couple of them and then still throwing money at the bullpen, or if you want to throw money at left field. If you have to go out and get a 1, you're basically strapping yourself to getting a 1 and then maybe kind of, you know, throwing a little bit of money here and there. And that's kind of the problem that we've seen on this team over the last couple of years, is that they've got the couple of really, really high-paid players in Verlander and Cabrera, and, you know, add in Victor Martinez and Sanchez, and then everybody else on the roster has to kind of be filled in with, you know, guys that are making minimum salaries or guys that are arbitration eligible kind of players. And if you can get more away from that, if you don't have to go out and tie up another, you know, $20 million a year and an ace necessarily this year, and you can pay, you know, mid-teens to a guy who's going to be a 3 or a 4 for you, that's going to be a heck of a lot easier on out, like you said, to go out in his first off season, you know, and not have to shoot for the moon. Maybe have to, you know, get a guy who's on the upswing, you know, kind of like Houston did with Mike Fiers. That's a guy that they've got for another 4 years, and he just threw a no-hitter, and he's not an ace necessarily, but he's a steady guy who can eat innings for you and who can be reliable. Kind of going back to, you know, a couple years ago, like they had in Doug Fister. You need those kind of guys to kind of fill out the middle of the rotation. Those are a lot easier to get than an ace.
How about the Tigers reuniting with Fister in 2016?
I think it's very possible. I don't think he's going to be somebody who, especially right now with the way he's pitched this year and kind of slid into the bullpen for Washington, I don't think he's going to be somebody who's going to, you know, command a qualifying offer from them. So you're not going to be looking at giving up a draft pick. Now, you know, where he's at in his career and what's led up to the, you know, the struggles that he's had this year, I'm not as sure on that because I haven't followed him obviously as closely as, you know, when he was here. But yeah, I think that's eminently possible. He's a guy that if he's right and he's going to pitch, anywhere close to the way he did last year for the Nationals or for the Tigers while he was here, I think that's very possible. I think that would be a great guy to fit into that. You can slot him in like to that 3 or 4 spot and not have to worry about it. Now, is he going to command big money long-term contract? Probably not. But if you're looking at a 3 or 4 year deal, I think that's eminently possible.
Now, Matt, what about adding Jeff Samardzija, who's pitching for the Southside Sox right now in Chicago and kind of stinking it up, not being very consistent, but has dominant ace caliber stuff here and there? How about him as a back end of the rotation guy or a third starter who you can get fairly on the cheap in the offseason because of his struggles this year for Chicago?
Yeah, and that's another guy like Fister who's kind of struggled this year, but he's got it in him someplace. You just kind of have to figure out why it's not coming out right now. And like you said, Samardzija does have ace stuff, and he's been kind of maybe not number one stuff, but he's kind of one of those maybe James Shields kind who's a 1A, but who can be almost approaching an ace. And if you're getting a guy like that, and you're buying low and you can get him, after a season that's maybe not as good right now, well, then you're not going to pay premium dollars, and you may get a premium talent if you can figure out how to tap into it. And I think that's one of the things that Al Avila mentioned at his introductory press conference when somebody asked him a legitimate question about, what the spending was going to be like under him, from the Ilitch regime, what kind of mandate he was given. And he said, quite frankly, that Mr. Ilitch is going to give him the resources or going to continue to allocate the resources for them to field a championship team. But he added the caveat, you have to spend wisely. And I think that's maybe where, he may end up not necessarily shooting for the moon on some of those real high-priced free agent guys, but maybe trying to, get a little more savvy in how they, maybe bring in a mid-tier free agent, whether it be a Samardzija who's having a down year or a Fister kind of guy who's, having a down year and is probably a mid-range free agent even at the top of his game. If you can bring in some guys like that and get the most out of them, that's how you can get a little more bang for your buck. Because again, the Tigers are going to be looking at the same payroll issues that they've had over the last 4 or 5 years with those huge contracts that they have on the books. It's going to kind of mitigate how much they can, go out and spend in the open market. So yeah, that's another idea where, Samardzija would be another guy who would fit right in, and you don't necessarily have to depend on him to be the ace, but he can certainly be valuable.
So, Matt, adding Fister and or Samardzija might be the way of addressing the issues in the rotation. But how about the corner outfield spot now? What are they going to do with that? And center field is also, I think, an issue right now. It's rising and becoming more and more of an issue as the season progresses, too, with Ghost out there and Davis going to be a free agent, not really that defensive, strong center fielder either, more of a liability out there in center. And he's a free agent at the end of this year. So with that being said, how about those now, voids, possibly going into next year? How are they going to address those, center field and the corner outfield spot? One of the 2 corner outfield spots.
Well, left field was something that Al Avila mentioned at his press conference. That's one of the only times we've had a real chance to kind of sit down and talk with him and kind of talk about the big plan. So, and obviously that was 4 days after they traded Cespedes. So that was foremost on everybody's mind. But I think logically, if we're looking at the needs that the Tigers have, it's going to be that starting rotation, and it's going to be after that, it's going to be bullpen. And if they can figure out a way to scrape together some money to put into, left field, or if you want to get a guy who maybe replaces the Rajai Davis role, or even if you want to try to, roll the dice and see if you can get last year's Rajai Davis rather than this year's Rajai Davis and bring him back as a free agent, I think that's going to be kind of down the pecking order on what they do. I don't see them going to free agency and, pegging a high-priced left fielder, whether it be Cespedes or Alex Gordon as their number one priority, because realistically, it would be nice, but that's kind of a luxury at this point. You've got a real solid right fielder in J.D. Martinez. You've got at least a good defensive center fielder in Ghost, but like you've mentioned, he's kind of reverted to what the Blue Jays had been seeing over the last couple of years as far as the high strikeouts and low contact rate and all of those kind of things. Started out so hot, but he really hasn't. As he's played more, kind of his offensive production has gone down because Rajai Davis really hasn't played a whole lot in center field in the second half of the season. He's played more in left, and he's spotted Ghost a couple of times. But yeah, that is something where I think that's one of the things that they may be able to do in September by bringing up guys like Stephen Moya. You give him a chance to play left field. He just recently made that transition down in Toledo, and if you bring him up at the end of Toledo season in about a week, give him some chances to play out there in left field and see, what you've got there, and if you're going to be able to, maybe patch that up with either whether it be a combination of, Collins and Moya, or maybe you go for a low-priced, reserve outfielder who's a right-handed hitter. I think ideally if they were going to do something and they were going to go the route of either giving that job to Collins or Moya in left field next year, probably what they would want to do is get a reserve a reserve outfielder who can play, both center and left, but also hits right-handed, because Ghost doesn't really hit, left-handers well at all. Moya doesn't hit left-handers well at all. Collins doesn't really hit, left-handers well. So Collins probably has the best chance of those three to hit left-handers, but you may kind of want that extra platoon guy there who can, not only defensively be okay out there, but who can, work in more of a platoon situation when you do face left-handers, because, none of those guys, especially being young as they are, I don't know that you kind of want to put them in a sink or swim situation where they have to face lefties all the time. But like I said, I think while they may apportion some money to left field, I don't see that being high on their priority list, considering how much work they have to do, in the rotation especially, and then, beyond that to fix a bullpen that realistically has been their biggest Achilles heel over the last couple of years. I think the money is probably better spent in those other areas.
Can the Tigers trust either Wilson or Rondon as a closer going into 2016 if they truly want to contend? Because I believe no. The answer is no. Maybe Wilson, but not Rondon. And I see them more as eighth inning guys, sit-up guys. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they may end up having to. I don't know. I mean, it depends, again, how you kind of dice up that, whatever that number is that you get for this is your budget next year, how you're going to slice that up, what portion goes to the rotation, what portion goes to the bullpen. And again, that's kind of what they've done in the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, they made the real splashy signing of Joe Nathan, but they didn't do a whole lot else around him. So they didn't really have a fallback plan. So then they ended up, having to go back and, trade for a Soria later on down the road when, they needed more. It may be a situation where, we'll see what we can get. But again, getting a closer on the free agent market is not going to be any more, really cost effective than it is to get a one or a two. It's proportionally, it's a little different, but it's still, it's still pricey to go out on the free agent market and expect to be able to get a closer. So they may be stuck in a situation where they have to see, okay, well, is it going to be Wilson? Is it going to be Rondon? I think Rondon's got it in him. I think it's just, I don't know, it's going to be one of those where we may always question, is it ever going to come out? I think he has the stuff to be a nasty closer, and I think that's what it may end up being something that they latch onto again, like they did a couple years ago, and just say, he's our guy. I don't think he's proven it. I don't think he's necessarily won that job by anything other than, just that one little stretch where he looked like he was very effective. As far as Wilson being a closer, I think he could handle the job. But again, like you said, I don't know that he's a closer on a championship quality squad. He's a seventh or eighth inning guy, ideally. If you can figure out a way inexpensively to put someone in that closer's role so that Wilson and Rondon slot in behind him, that would be perfect. But again, that's going to be the question. There is going to be how much does that cost, and that may be the limiting factor there. It obviously would be very ideal if you could get a lockdown closer, who can come in and slide both of those guys back, and then you can have Hardy as the late left-hander, and then you start to have the makings of a good bullpen. But again, those lockdown closers don't grow on trees, and they're hardly inexpensive. So that may be the question mark there.
Speaking of the bullpen, current skipper, Tiger skipper Brad Ausmus has proven night in and night out that he can't handle the bullpen. He has bullpen mismanagement issues, to say the least. And with that being said, how long is the leash you think for Ausmus going forward? Because I think the fate's already been decided that he'll be ousted at the end of the season. But what's your take on that, Matt?
Well, a lot of people were asking me that around midseason before anything happened, higher above him. And I said all along that I thought his fate was tied to Dave Dombrowski, just simply because Dave was the guy who brought him in. And usually what happens is if you make a change at the general manager, then that guy gets to make the decision on who he wants as his skipper. Now, obviously, Brad and Al Avila have worked together, so it's not like, you brought somebody in cold from the outside who's going to bring in his own guy from a different organization. That's a little different than, the normal situation. But again, I think it's going to come down to whether or not Al Avila feels comfortable with him going forward. I think you're right in that the bullpen management issues have looked so glaring this year. But I think a large part of that reason is that you have to look at the bullpen he was given, and the bullpen he was given had a lot of spare parts, had a lot of pieces that didn't necessarily go together well. And when he started the season, Hardy and Wilson weren't even on the active roster. Those guys both came up, and those guys both at one point were the long relief men who kind of worked their way into more prominent roles simply because they were effective and no one else was. So, and then not to excuse, Brad's bullpen management entirely, because yes, there have been issues, but I think in some respects, you're not looking at him dealing with an ideal bullpen. You're looking at him dealing with, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Because this guy can't pitch and I can't trust this guy. And you know what I mean? It's not necessarily a standard situation where he knows I have this guy I can lean on and this guy I can lean on, and then I have to mix and match after that. For most of the season, he had one or two guys he could lean on at the very most, and even those guys were shaky at best. So I think it comes down to, in the off season, as Al Avila has said, everything is going to be open to evaluation. Everybody in the organization, from the top down, is going to be open to evaluation. And I think a lot's going to depend on, whether you do see a situation in this last month. I don't think it's happened yet, but where you get those situations where a team's out of contention and they just kind of team the skipper out. And if that happens, I think then it is a done deal that, Al will move on in the off season and find somebody else and bring in somebody else. Now, obviously, it probably depends on, I don't think their finish record-wise is going to change tremendously. I don't think there's a whole lot of buttons Brad can push in this last month to change that a whole lot. But I think it will more depend on, whether or not he loses the clubhouse and what kind of respect the players have for him at that point. Up till this point, I don't think that's been an issue, but you never know how that's going to go. And once you get into September, when it's truly a lost season like this one has become.
And, as you said, it's been a crapshoot all season long with the Tigers pen. And with that, Matthew B. Mowery of the Oakland Press, thank you very much for all your time today on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Have a good one.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
And with that, thank you very much once again to Matthew B. Mowery of the Oakland Press, Tigers beat writer for the Oakland Press. Great stuff, great insight from him about Dave D., the relationship between Ausmus and him, how he thinks that Ausmus was tied to Dombrowski so much that at this point, his fate maybe has been decided. And I think short of a miracle, like we had said before in the podcast, before he came on with us too, Doc, that short of a miracle, he has no chance of staying on for a third season. And Al Avila will reevaluate everybody at the end of this campaign and look forward to 2016 to see who's the best option to lead this ball club into the future. And I don't think Ausmus is that guy that can lead the club sufficiently enough into the future in a successful manner. So, in so many words, I see him being ousted at the end of the season. And I think Matt was kind of leaning towards that. And also, really quick, he says that Wilson might be that ninth inning guy, but for a 2016 ball club that's contending for the American League Central Division title and the American League pennant, he's thinking they might have to go in a different route, but maybe the cost-efficient route. And same thing with the rotation, Doc, which might be the case. They probably have to make some financially savvy decisions for one time, because they really haven't done it all the time, but for once, they probably have to turn to or go in that direction in the offseason and sign those guys maybe more on the cheap that are bargains, like Samart or like Pfister, who are back-end guys that you can get cheaper right now because they've kind of struggled and failed to a certain degree in 2015. And now, let me move on, because we have to here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and I want to talk about my National League Cy Young favorites. And first and foremost, Doc, did you watch the no-hitter that Jake Arrieta of the Cubbies threw on Sunday Night Baseball against the Dodgers, who have been no-hit now twice, were no-hit twice in the month of August? Surprising to say, at least for me, as a person that knows the Dodgers have some good offensive firepower. When they're going, Ethier, Adrian Gonzalez, Yasiel Puig, Crawford when he's healthy, Rollins when he's healthy, Utley when he's going. All those guys when they're going, they can rake. And right now they've been no-hit. We can say that twice. They were no-hit in the month of August. Very surprising to me, Doc.
Who else got him?
Mike Fiers, who Matthew B. Mowery of the Oakland Press actually brought up with us about how the Astros got him on the cheap at the trade deadline, cost-efficient guy as a third starter, and look at him now, threw a no-hitter against the mighty LA Dodgers and got it done. And then Arrieta did the same on Sunday Night Baseball this past Sunday.
And a few seasons back, I used to always recall that Tampa Bay would be the team that would get to no-hit quite a bit, and that's good stuff. A lot of good no-hitters, a lot of good pitchers this year, throwing one-hitters. Good stuff by the pitchers, and Arrieta is a superstar in the making, and he's just, a guy that is must-watch now for the Cubs, who have just had an amazing season. A team that a lot of people thought were on the up-and-coming maybe in future seasons, but with the addition of Joe Madden, Theo Epstein, one day maybe we can throw buku bucks at, maybe in 10 years, and he can continue the progress maybe that Avila makes. But Theo Epstein's great. Imagine if he potentially gets a championship with Boston and then turns around the Cubs.
Greatest GM of all time. Greatest club president in Major League Baseball history, maybe you could say, Doc, about Theo Epstein. And the GM there is Jed Hoyer now, who was with the Padres. So he's done something as well, but Epstein's making the final decisions, as Dombrowski was with the Tigers, and as Avila is now. But to go on with our Cy Young favorite discussion here in the National League, Arrieta is not number one, though, for me after throwing that no-hitter. It is still Clayton Kershaw, who has a good enough record, 11-6, FIP, fielding independent pitching, for those who don't know what that stat exactly is. So it takes out the fielding, obviously, and what you have behind you, playing behind you defensively. And it equates to a 2.10 fielding independent pitching mark for Clayton Kershaw this year. And he's been worth 6.6 wins above replacement, if you're really analytical and sabermetric, friendly or sabermetrically inclined. So with that, Kershaw has the best WAR among starting pitchers in the National League. But number two is that man Arrieta, who just threw that no-hitter. And with that no-hitter thrown, Doc, you could argue that he should be the favorite to win the Cy Young this year. And because Kershaw maybe doesn't have as great of numbers as he did last year when he won, you can take that into account and maybe take the award away from Kershaw because of that. You have to kind of repeat or be even better to win it twice in 2 years in a row. To win it 2 years in a row, specifically. Kershaw hasn't been as great. He's been dominant for the most part, but as consistently as last year, the answer is no. And Arrieta has really kicked it up a notch, picking up that no-hitter. And then Greinke, you could argue, who's the number 3 favorite for me for NL Cy Young favorites. You could say he's been arguably the most consistent starting pitcher in the LA Dodgers rotation from opening day to now. So it could even be Greinke stealing some votes from Kershaw. And I have him ranked number 3 in my Cy Young favorite rankings here. And I go to number 6, as deep as that. Number 4, though, first and foremost, for me is Max Scherzer, who's 11-11 now. So that's going to hurt his candidacy. But still some good quality numbers. 2.76 fielding independent pitching. Worth 5 wins above replacement. Good enough to be in the discussion for the Cy Young in the NL. And then after that, Garrett Cole, the young phenom ace for the Pirates. He's going to lead that Buccles team maybe all the way to the Fall Classic. He is that good. And his numbers are currently 15-7 record-wise, 2.69 FIP, and worth 4.3 wins above replacement. And all these WAR numbers are according to Fangraphs.com, by the way, to all you guys listening. And number 6, last but not least, and really he is last but not least because I'm talking about Madison Bumgarner now. And this guy can deal. He showed it in the postseason. Postseason MVP, greatest maybe results produced by a starting pitcher in the postseason in Major League Baseball history. Going with the greats, the best of all time to do it in the postseason and in the Fall Classic specifically. And Bumgarner's numbers right now are mightily solid, Doc. 16-6 record-wise, 2.76 FIP, plus worth 4.4 wins above replacement, nearly 4.5. Garrett Cole, below 4.5 as well, but I have Cole ranked above Bumgarner because of his FIP number of 2.69, and Bumgarner being at 2.76 for FIP. But obviously that could change based on the next start for each guy too, Doc. But to sum it all up, Kershaw still is my number 1, my favorite to win the NL Cy Young. Barely behind him, barely trailing him, is Jake Arrieta now after throwing that no-hitter. And he had some strides that he was making and some fire that he was blowing to get really to number 1 before that no-hitter. But now at this point, he's like 1B. You could really argue that. 1A is Kershaw, 1B is Jake Arrieta. And then number 2, right after that, is Greinke. Very close 1 through 3 for the Cy Young and the National League. And we have one final topic to discuss, as I noted before at the start of today's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. And the American League pennant favorites now. Doc, do you have any yourself right now? Do you have one maybe in particular that really sticks out to you as well?
I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm going to probably pay attention intently to how Kansas City plays the Tigers because I just watched Toronto decimate the Tigers with the great hitting. They got solid pitching, and they added maybe that final piece they need in a David Price. Maybe they can go over the top. They've gone all in. So right now, my favorite is Toronto, But really, a close second, I like Kansas City. I like what they're doing. I like the addition of Johnny Cueto. I like the fact that last year they were so close within, a couple of key hits away in that 7th game to potentially coming back and winning that Game 7. But I like Kansas City. I like the fact that if they have a lead in the 6th to 7th inning, you're almost going to guarantee yourself a loss because their bullpen is spot on. Flamethrowers in the bullpen.
Oh, yeah.
Something that makes me very envious as to what the Tigers should have had. They've done now in Kansas City, and now they're making moves again to kind of fine tune that final team that's gonna make that push. So for me, it's Toronto 1A, and then 1B is Kansas City.
KC for me is number 3. Number 1 is Toronto as well. I see them going all the way to the World Series and winning it all potentially. Right now, they are my World Series favorite as well. And then number 2, the Yankees. I see the ALCS coming down to the Yanks and Jays. How about that matchup possibly? 2 really good pitching teams a little. I guess I can't say that, but lineups they can hit. Now, the bullpen for the Yankees, really good. Jays has improved. Rotation-wise, not very good on either side. But at least the Jays have that ace in David Price now, as we talked about. And the Yankees kind of have some budding aces in Michael Pineda, and then Masahiro Tanaka, who can really duel when he gets going. So I like those 2 guys. Price, Burley's been good this year. Dickey's been good of late for the Jays as their number 2, number 3 was going to be their ace a few years ago. And the Jays bullpen now, Hawkins, Astuna. So their bullpen is kind of building up some steam, some momentum going into the playoffs, which is good for the Jays because they could use that bullpen prowess and reinforcements, where the Yanks kind of already have that backed up with Betances and Andrew Miller at the back end of games, who's lights out right now for the Yanks. So it's about health, though, as well. Health for those teams. And we'll see who stays healthy. The Jays hitters, will they stay healthy? Jose Bautista, Troy Tulowitzki, and Donaldson has to stay healthy. And Price has to stay healthy. And Burley and Dickey are older. They're kind of aging vets. And the Yanks, Tanaka has to stay healthy. Can he? Pineda, can he? A-Rod, Teixeira, who has a shin injury now. Those guys also have to stay healthy. But if they do very good balanced offensive attacks, 1 through 9 in their respective lineups, and good enough pens, and I say good enough rotations, with a player or 2 here that allows one of the 2 to be favored in the match between rotations and bullpens, where I think Price gives the Jays the edge in the rotation, and the bullpen Miller and Betances gives the Yanks the edge in that matchup. And that's why I have the Jays winning that matchup in the ALCS against the Yankees. Any comment on that, Doc, really quick?
Man, I'm looking forward to the playoffs. I know the Tigers won't be there, but it's going to be good stuff in the American League. And then so probably next week you'll give us your National League
I will have
favorites.
to, definitely.
Man.
And you know what? I think the Royals are a close number 3, but for me, I don't have them going all the way this year or even to the ALCS because of the pressure now. The expectations are high, sky high. They weren't last year, remember, Doc. They went in, they didn't barely get by, but they weren't the team that was expected to do anything. They kind of got by without any expectations. This year, everything is about the Royals winning it all. They have gone all in. All the poker chips are in. And with Cueto, and Gordon may be leaving eventually too. They've got to win this year. If they don't, they might not be the high contending, the highest likelihood team in the American League to win it all next year. They might take a step back or 2 if they don't win this year, and that's why they've gone all in and why they have to win it all this year. So if they don't, it will be a disappointment for the Royals. And you know what? I won't be ashamed of that being a disappointment. Won't be ashamed of them having to deal with that.
Vito, you got me excited, man. I was kind of checking out in baseball. You got me excited here to check out these playoffs. And good stuff, Vito. Very good stuff. Very insightful. And I'm looking forward to the future podcast. Me and you will sit here and chat, do news and notes, talk about the Tigers. And, man, if Kansas City wins, it'll be another, needle because, they hadn't won it since 1985. They've kind of been on the uptick. And you got to remember, we used to laugh at Kansas City.
The laughing stock, and now they're not. Now they're the cream of the crop.
In 2 short seasons.
Yeah.
They've
elevated.
And also keep in mind, too, I want to have a chat and future podcasts about Kansas City's manager. Because Ned Yost is taking a lot of criticism.
A lot of hits.
Because people who are on the sabermetric train are like, he does things that are against the, what you're supposed to do statistically, but he's got success. Got him to the World Series. He's maybe a guy that can be looked at like a Joe Madden that's unconventional, but maybe in a different way, but has results. Has talent, but you can have talent, a.k.a. the Tigers. And if you don't manage them correctly, hey, I take Ned Yost as the manager of the Tigers any day of the week.
Well, you can't mess up that bullpen, right? I mean, you have Ryan Madsen, Kelvin Herrera, Wade Davis, all those good guys at the back end of the pen. He can't mess that up.
So keep that in mind. I want to check in on Ned Yost and what he brings to the table on future podcasts.
And really quick, Girardi with the Yankees, right? He's proven he's a good postseason manager. Another reason why the Yankees can maybe win the World Series this year, or at least get to the Fall Classic. And the Jays, John Gibbons, still a little bit more highly touted than Ned Yost, but Yost now has that postseason experience, remember. Did it all. Pushed all the right buttons. So he did do that last year. Now, he's not always been the most highly esteemed manager, most credible guy, and he's not sabermetric friendly. We know that about him. And he's made some dumb excuses for why he's used guys here and there and pulled guys out early. And he did so, remember, in the one-game playoff in the American League wildcard game against the Athletics last year. Remember, he pulled his starter early, looked like it was a mistake at first. Royals came back and won that game, luckily for his sake, because it kind of saved his managerial job, I think, as well, in KC. And right behind the Royals at number 3 for me is the Astros at number 4. Watch out for them. Okay, they got some good rotation arms, too. They really do. They really do. They added Scott Kazmir, Dallas Keuchel. I mean, that guy, or Keuchel, he's that guy that could be the Cy Young. He's a Cy Young favorite now in the American League, perhaps, with 15 or 16 wins. He is that good. And McCullers, you got Scott Kazmir as a veteran presence now in that rotation as well. So you got some really good guys, standout guys, who are young, the top 2, or number 1 in Keuchel, but Kazmir's really the number 2 there now. He's a reliable lefty. So for me, with those 2 going out, and you also got, like I said, McCullers, who's a rookie, but he's pitching really well. He's pitching like he's a veteran out there every 5th day for the Astros. And they also have the bullpen string at the back end of games, kind of like the Royals, similar to the Royals. When you have Gregerson, a guy like that going out there, you got guys that can really throw heat, and get it done at the back end of games, just like the Royals. But they're a notch below because the Royals are more proven, and Cueto's more of that proven ace, I guess, by a few years now. He is by a few years, than Dallas Keuchel, who might be the Cy Young Award winner, though. So it's tough to kind of pick one or the other, and you got to like the Astros' young hitters, too. Correa, obviously. You got George Springer. You got Evan Gattis hitting for power, Chris Carter hitting for power. All these guys that can hit for power, and they've added Carlos Gomez for the outfield, who has a ton of speed and can get on base and also hit for power. So they're very power-friendly, power-proven, 1 through 9 in that lineup, and that's why they have a chance as well to maybe even surprise a little bit, because if they start hitting those home runs in the playoffs, they could make it all the way to the World Series too. And for me, Doc, that's where it ends. For me, in terms of teams being able to make it all the way and win the American League pennant and being able to make it to the Fall Classic in the American League, those are the only 4 teams in my opinion. Number 5 would be the Rangers, though. Barely, because they have Cole Hamels now. Giovanni Gallardo's pitching great. Prince Fielder's been great, unfortunately, for us as Tigers fans. He's been great all season long. And they still have Shin-Soo Choo, Adrian Beltre, Gallo, when he's going. I think he'll be a presence in September, be a guy that they will use now in September. And he showed some signs, was striking out a lot, got sent down at one point, but has an extreme amount of power. So all those power guys in that lineup, too, 1 through 9, that could be a dangerous team as well, potentially. But still, they're kind of on the outside looking in, you know. So they're number 5, the number 5 team specifically for me in my top 5 rankings. And the top 4, to recap, number 1 Jays, number 2 Yanks, 3 Royals, number 4 Astros. Those are the top 4 teams that I realistically see having the most legit shot at making it all the way to the Fall Classic this year.
Great stuff, Vito. Good podcast.
That's a lot of stuff I just gave to you, but I'm all done.
Okay. That was a great podcast. Good wrap up. Thank you to Matthew Mowery for coming on the Tigers Talk podcast, breaking down the news and notes with the Tigers. And thank you for Vito for breaking down the potential Cy Young candidates in the National League and his favorites to win the World Series in the American League. Great stuff, Vito. Look forward to chatting a little bit more. And you've got me. You've kind of renewed my passion for baseball. And we definitely are not giving up on the Tigers. They got a big week ahead. I know that they're not playing that great, but we still got to break it down, and I'm enjoying doing this with you.
We got to talk, I guess, about the Tigers. And they're not playing great. They're not playing great at all, Doc. Remember that. And thank you to Doc, John Macroom, for subbing in for my brother this week as my co-host. Very good stuff from you, from Matthew B. Mowery, as you said, from the Oakland Press. And thank you once again to DetroitSportsNation.com for hosting every single edition of our podcast, Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And for episode number 7, tune in next week to another great and fresh edition of the podcast. Talk to you then.